Hey, I think we are live. Hopefully we're live. We should be on.
Yeah, hold on, babe.
Oh, yep, yes, we are there. We are showing up on YouTube now. So we can just tweet this out, and then get started. Right now. Atheist accepts Apologist challenge. All right. So I tweeted, but I didn't tweet everybody. But we're live, so we are live. And I think Craig is muted right now. I think he may be tweeting it out himself. I guess we don't have anyone watching, so that's okay. But it's a bit of dead air at the beginning here, so we will be starting soon. And so this is this video, and probably explain it again once Craig gets on. But this video is oh, there's Craig. So
yes,
yeah,
can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. So did you tweet
Are we
it
actually
out?
live right now?
We're on YouTube.
Booted. I got banished.
Oh, did you? Yeah, we're live. If you look on Twitter, I tweeted the link, so you could retweet it if you want. And I didn't list a whole bunch of people because I'm trying to talk at the same time. But we are live, so we're providing great content right now because we're so organized in getting this this stream going. You with me, Craig? Did we lose Craig? Craig is, I think, on a phone, so we may have lost him. But so this is our first joint episode in this joint project we're doing. An atheist accepts an apologist challenge, where Craig has challenged me that he can, through exposing me to various sources and methods, that he could either convince me to believe in God or be more open to God or to become more spiritual. We'll talk about what that means. I think in this call. And so I posted an announcement video and the first video doing some homework that Craig asked me to do. And so that just went up today. It's sort of long. It's a book review. I went about 50 minutes, a little longer than I had thought, but I guess thorough, basically on my thoughts about this book from a Christian who talks about his journey from faith to losing his faith and then back to regaining his faith. And we'll be talking about, Craig has watched that video of mine, and we'll be talking about that. So this is basically an exercise in active open-mindedness, an exercise in communication. I think we just lost Craig, but an exercise in two people who disagree with each other, who can talk to one another and who can communicate with one another about their beliefs and to take it seriously and respectfully. Craig, you back?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, phew. Yeah, I was talking the whole time.
Were you? No.
Yes. I did the old tried and true. I just exited out and then came back in, and now you can hear me.
Yeah, no, I couldn't hear a word. So you've been silent so far for most.
Yeah, I thought we were gonna be done because I was like, Can you hear? I could hear everything you were saying. Everything was fine,
Yeah.
except you couldn't hear me at all. So, all right.
Yeah.
So, yes, you're gonna. This is what's gonna happen after. We're gonna do this over a period of months, and this is what's gonna happen. You're either gonna become a Christian and start tithing to Craig Reed. B, remain an atheist and still tithe, an atheist who
Right.
tithes to Craig Reed, or become a spiritual atheist, a more spiritual atheist, which you aren't that far from now. So,
Yeah, I guess we have to talk about what you mean by spiritual versus what I mean by spiritual. So
well,
that would be something
we'll get
could
into that
break
over the course of. We'll flesh out everything. But your book
Yeah.
report was. Should we? What did you? I didn't hear how much you introduced. Did you have more to say?
Yeah. Well, I started going. I just described the book briefly, but why don't maybe you could tell people why you wanted me to read this book? What you had in mind?
Well,
in assigning it to me.
Okay, so first of all, is that I gave you what I thought was a decent amount of homework, not too much, right?
Yep, no, it was perfect. Now I've been busy with some other projects, so I haven't finished all of the homework. What the other assignment you gave me? So I finished the book and I did my video on the book. You'd also asked me to cobble together 50 quotes from the Bible that I liked. Hey,
Right.
Gavin, I've started that process. I've gone through the first 3 Gospels. So I reread those, but then I got a bit distracted by some other tasks. So I'm a little bit behind. I have been pulling out quotes.
Right. So
But
I have.
yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out because I have more homework assignments to come, but it's at about the same pace. So that pace is pretty much okay. That's an acceptable. It's not too burdensome. It's
Yeah, no,
just enough.
that pace is perfect. I just launched a Discord server, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, Discord
Yes,
server. So that's been just happened to coincide with our deciding to do this project. Exactly, it was 3 weeks ago that we launched this. So I just had a bit of extra work there. But yeah, no, the pace is perfect. It wasn't too onerous, and yeah, we're
So
good.
good. Yeah, and your book report on this was really thorough, actually. So we'll have a lot to talk about, and then we'll take it from there. So
Yeah, so maybe you can add a link in the description to my video on my channel for the book review I did.
right.
And so people can watch that, but I don't think they need to have watched that to enjoy what we're talking about here today.
No, not at
We'll
all.
probably be going over the same stuff.
Yes. So okay. So what? So the first thing you asked me is why did I choose that? Why do you think I chose that? Do you always
I
answer a
think
question with the question? I always do.
yeah, sure. I think you chose this book because, well, I don't know if you picked it specifically for me, but I think you saw probably that I would identify with this writer in some ways in terms of his appreciation of science, his appreciation of skepticism, and that he also, the struggle he has with his faith and the fact that he's clearly thought about all of these different areas deeply and still found a way to believe. Is that
Right. Yes, that's a lot of it. It was funny though when I listened to your book report because it was like the things that I thought the book were about and the things that you got out of it. It's like did we even read the same book? Because I was
really?
thinking
That's curious.
there were parts that I was like, okay, this is going to be really interesting how he processes this and how he processes this. And I'm not even sure if they were even in your book report, but your book report was really thorough. So it's kind of
And
like,
also, I did read it a few weeks ago, and then I got distracted. So I wanted to record my book report right after I read it. So I was going off my notes for the most part. So some things may have slipped
do
my
you
mind.
have your notes too? Because we'll go over the first parts of what you said.
Yeah, I have my notes in front of me.
Okay, perfect. Because it's kind of like with the John Vervaeke. It's like there are 50. We're in that Meaning Crisis series, and there are 50 videos. And if you ask me what it's about, I've got like 4 things that I think it's about, and like almost all the rest of it, I kind of tune out as, oh yeah,
Right.
that's right. The book was about that too. But the thing about him that's really interesting, which you picked up on right away, is that he, unlike most people who deconvert, now tell me if you agree with this, he deconverts, but then he wanted to become a Christian again. He didn't want to necessarily stay deconverted. There was
Right.
some desire, some yearning, some I want to get back to Jesus in him the whole time.
And I would say
right?
a very strong desire.
Right. So you picked up on that right away. So he wasn't, but you also did pick up on. Now let's go through the first part of the of your book report.
Hey,
you
John.
tell me.
John Lloyd, just saying hi, John. John Lloyd's here. Gavin Hurleman's here. Thanks, guys, for watching. Well, I mean, just because we've had a few people join, let me just give a quick summary of what we're doing here. So Craig launched a challenge, a public challenge that he could help convince an atheist or non-believer to either come to believe in God, or at least believe in God more, or become more spiritual through a series of materials and practices. And so we've officially started. I have a couple videos now on my channel, which we'll link below later, where I announce the project, and then he gave me a book review to do, a book of Mike. Yeah, we should say what the book is. I think I may have said it earlier, but Mike McCarthy's Finding God in the Waves. And so Craig asked me to read this book and give my thoughts, which I've now done in a separate video on my channel, again, which we'll link below. But now we're going to talk about the, how we both broached the book.
Right. So let's start from the beginning. Start from your first part of your book report. So you got it. You got a lot of what he was about, correct?
Yeah, I think so. I think he was a lonely kid, whose family deeply enshrined him in the evangelical church. And he very early on developed a relationship with God where he would talk to God. It was very comforting to him, especially when he didn't have friends. I think I said in my report, we're a similar age. He grew up with an Apple II in his house. I grew up with an Apple II in mine. I think we were both not terribly popular and hung out with the nerdy kids. I think he was more nerdy than I ever was. He seemed to be really into those aspects to a point that I wasn't. But I think we have fairly similar, aside from the religious aspect. I think we probably had fairly similar. Yeah, we had some commonalities as
interesting about him in terms of that is he was raised Christian. You were raised kind of a secular Jew,
Reformed Judaism. Yeah,
personality types. I think you're probably similar, and that's kind of why
I agree.
He's definitely a liberal Christian now, and he's a moderate in terms of politics. Probably even left, probably more left wing than myself, but. So there's probably even a prototype personality that I would say he is that's very similar to most atheists. Is that true? Kind of, maybe.
Well, certainly when he talks quite a bit about his after his loss of faith. His loss of faith was spurned in a great part by his becoming exposed to the skeptic community. So he certainly like the first part of the book, I think, is designed to talk to the skeptic atheist, to convince them that
he was one of them.
He understands us and we understand him. And I think he did a very good job of that. He showed very clearly he understood, you could say even the typical atheist arguments, and even better than a lot of atheists. He goes into the science. He's clearly very bright. He understands the science of the Big Bang, of evolution, of all this stuff much better than I ever could. And he talks about, doing, I think, an Ask Me Anything. And so he really hopped into the atheist skeptic online, the skeptosphere. And definitely I'm convinced that he understands, typical atheism, skepticism.
Yes. And one of the things that he was really good at, one of the things that I liked about the book is he goes into it's very similar to where John Vervaeke's at. It's very similar to stuff that you already have a pretty good understanding of, just if but you haven't gone into the depth. But he goes into the depth of, like, the different, like, but you already understand the neuroscience of the spiritual experience, which he goes into
Right.
fairly thoroughly. So how would you describe that? You described it really well in the book review.
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
kind of almost completely understand. There's a neuroscience. Tell me if I say anything incorrect. There's a neuroscience to a spiritual experience. So there's something that, irrespective of whether I'm connecting to a deity or not, you understand the physiological responses that I'm having. Like when I say I have more peace of mind, I get more
Yeah.
calm, more resolute. There's an actual neuroscience to that, and you understand that pretty well, if not perfectly at this point, right?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
exactly. And he talks about how, like, he recognizes that in performing the rituals and praying, that he's reinforcing certain brain patterns and reinforcing. I mean, he talks about the science aspect of it much better than I ever could. But he really has a good sense that when you do these practices over and over again, you are rewiring your brain.
Right. And that's one of the most important things I got out of it, because that's key. And you said it in your book report, part of this is you're cultivating a practice. So one of
Yes.
the epistemologies isn't just the epistemology of God exists, the ontology, but the epistemology of how you do something that produces this kind of spiritual result. Right? Is that
Right.
so? Now tell me about what you thought about that part, because you seem to get that really well
Well,
and
yeah, I
connect
mean,
to it, actually.
yeah, I mean, my basic view is that, from a phenomenological point of view, so from a describing the experience point of view, I think, I mean, atheists and theists can have very similar experiences. We just may interpret them differently, but I think, again, from the experiential phenomenological point of view, you know, there's no reason why an atheist can't have a similar experience to a Christian. So, it's just, the question is, where is the cause? So an atheist will probably attribute it to brain functions, where a Christian may attribute it to talking to God. But they may have a very similar type of process, and that I don't doubt that by engaging in certain practices, that you can foster those relationships. So he talks about, fostering that relationship with God by just going and talking to God. And I forget the exact words, but he says, in his, after his reconversion, like, fake it till you make it type thing, where if you start just doing it, you can start cultivating those type of experiences. Did that answer your question?
Kind of. Let's just go back. Let's forget about where we're going with it, and let's just talk about you get the neuroscience of the spiritual experience, right? You
Yes.
almost fully understand it. How would you describe that as a secular person? Like the rituals are, and John Vervaeke speak, let's say.
Yeah. So when John Vervaeke speak, he would.
So
John Vervaeke.
forget about that I'm trying to scam you into becoming a Christian.
Sure. No, I get it. So John Vervaeke, who's a psychology professor from U of T, who I've been doing some work with, and who has this great series called Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, and who I now run a Discord about. So we'll maybe put the link to the Discord in the show notes too. But so he would call the rituals, such as prayer, and other religious rituals, psychotechnologies, which are these sort of mental tools, these mental practices that, when you do them over and over again, reinforce certain habits, brain patterns, and so on. So that, for example, from a neurological level, I think scientists have determined that meditation and prayer are very, very similar. And right. Mike in the book acknowledges this, and Vervaeke has talked about this. So I would say that, when somebody prays, I think they're reinforcing certain brain patterns that probably produce some very good results, like improved insight, improved capacity for wisdom, improved self-reflection. So, ask and you shall receive. Asking for an answer. When you pray, you're much more likely to receive an answer, because the prayer and meditation facilitate and help cultivate your ability to figure things out.
Right. Okay. Wait. So let me stop you right there, because you said a lot of good stuff already. So like in prayer, you are some when you have a scripture like ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find. You when you are going into a place of prayer, you are becoming more receptive internally to skills that you may possess that you don't necessarily know you possess. Like you're slowing down your brain waves, so you're maybe accessing your subconscious mind. You're accessing other types of deep-seated psychological tools maybe that you don't really know that you have. So you're accessing a type of wisdom that is not necessarily supernatural, but like can be explained in the natural that way. Is that fair? Would you say that's right?
Yeah, I think that's close enough. I won't pretend to understand the exact neurological mechanisms that are in play, but I know what the research shows from what Professor Viveki says, and he studied this, is that meditation and I think by extension prayer can improve your capacity to have insights. Now that doesn't
Right.
mean your insights are correct, but doing regular practices will help you have more insights more often. Uh, so you could interpret this as, I've I've cultivated certain brain patterns that help me make more connections and help me have insight, or I'm doing it over and over again. I'm talking to God and God has spoken to me, right? But I think phenomenologically, like we probably have a similar experience, if maybe with a different filter on it. A theist may probably may perceive it more in line with God, and an atheist may perceive it more in line with themselves. But they're both coming out of nowhere. Like when you have an insight while meditating, you didn't choose to have it. It just pops into your mind, right?
Right. So you could be accessing, how I've described like the miracle of the car keys, is that you are accessing your subconscious mind by slowing down, doing a lot of different things intuitively that, while conscious, are not fully conscious. Like you don't really know what you're doing. You're kind of doing it by intuition and hunches. That gives you more access to your subconscious mind. So that's how the miracle of the car keys happens. You remember, your subconscious knew where you put the car keys. You, the conscious agent, didn't. So when you go into prayer, the Christian goes, hallelujah, Jesus just showed me where the car keys is. But you're actually just you're slowing down your mind enough to access a different part of your intellect. That's how that can be described naturally, right?
Yeah. Yes. Now, again, I'm not whether or not it's the slowing down. I'm not sure if that's the exact mechanism or not. But I think what you're describing, I think, is accurate, and there's a lot of good evidence for it. And I know when I meditate, I have that experience myself. So,
what happens when you meditate? Let's go, because you're kind of interested in spiritual experiences now already. As an atheist, would put you in a different category than a lot of atheists, because a lot of them are triggered out by even the mention of spiritual. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess it depends. Like we may have a slightly different definition of spiritual, meaning that I may not be convinced that it's actually a spirit, so to speak, some supernatural contact. But I think I don't have a better word than spiritual for a lot of the things that we're talking about. A feeling of transcendence, or evaluating, like John Vervaeke talks about the combinatorial explosion of reality, that there's almost there's this line between awe and terror, that when you're confronting the unknown, and that there are benefits to engaging in psychotechnologies or rituals or methods that help you cultivate these experiences. So through meditation, say having an altered state of consciousness that can produce insight or wisdom. And I'm just getting into it. I'm just starting to figure out. I've started meditating again every day, and I want to learn about other psychotechnologies, so to speak, that can help produce, again, the feeling of wellness and well-being, and
so you recognize that there are benefits to be derived from it along purely secular.
Yes.
Like when I say I go into my prayer closet and I experience real peace of mind there, you believe me and you say,
Yes.
I could have that experience without this Jesus thing, without this Jesus God.
Right, and that's something that I took from the book. I don't know, maybe that's a little closer to the end, so maybe we'll get there. But just that,
Well, no, we can
yeah,
jump around a little, because I will bring
yeah,
us back to, because what would are your notes right in front of you? Because there were a couple of
yeah,
things I want to make sure we get on. But
yeah. Sure, go ahead.
what's the first couple of things you were talking about in the book, in your book review?
Well, in terms of quotes, for example, like I talked about that, I don't doubt, for example, that the church provides community comfort, stability. I understand. I talked about his taking care to show both sides. Like, for example, he pointed out that he understands why the faithful and the skeptical find it so difficult to understand one another. He understands the neurological networks and the rewriting of the brain. That he, let me just see that, uh, I talked about, and then I went into his loss. So his loss of faith and uh, the extreme emotional hit that it was for him, and that and then he
Right.
replaced it with
That's an interesting.
existential.
Okay, so a lot of this stuff you almost intuitively understand. The one of the things that you want to believe what's true, and you don't want to be manipulated at all. In you, so there was
Right,
a thing that he started talking about where he says, like, fake it till you make it, and you bristled at that immediately. And part of why he said that is you guys are coming from the one different place that you guys are completely coming from is, for him, losing faith was something that he wanted to get back, and for
right.
you, there was not really any faith to lose. You're just kind of always been a skeptical. You've always been sort of like, if there's a God, show me the goods. Why do I even care? You've never really
Yeah, well,
kind
at
of.
least not since I was 11 or 12. Yeah, I lost
Right.
it very
But
young. Yeah,
I'm trying to think if, like, because when I first came to church, I wasn't necessarily yearning for God, but what I was yearning for more than anything else was peace of mind. That was the thing that I actually found in the first church I started connecting with, that I found in spades. And that was like, I think, underlying people's motivations. This is speculation, so I'm not saying that this is
yeah,
absolute truth, but there's some things that are really important to people that are going to motivate them and maybe pull them in a direction
yeah.
that would lead them towards religion, and
Well,
other
I mean,
things.
here's the thing too, that my family, I mean, we were Reformed Judaism. We went to synagogue on the high holidays. We celebrated Hanukkah and Passover. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. That's pretty well it. We didn't go to synagogue every Saturday. So I didn't grow up with a culture of turning to the church or the synagogue for an important part of my life. It was really
Right.
a special event. It was a couple times a year, or weddings and funerals. That
Right.
was basically, and then eventually I had to go to religious school, which taught about the, not to be, taught about the Old Testament. And then I did a little bit of Hebrew school where I learned a little bit of Hebrew, which I only remember like a few sentences now. But that was really it. And my parents let me quit when I was 13. I had to
Right.
stay until I had a bar
That's
mitzvah,
kind
and
of
then
how I
I
was
then I
as a
quit.
Catholic, though. That's what's very,
Yeah.
very, and we were raised in probably a similar type of town, upper middle class, secular town, left wing.
Yeah.
And that's how I was as a Catholic. We went to church on Christmas and Easter, and I got no, like, I did sometimes catch myself, like, believing in God or praying outside of any relationship to church at all. Like, when I was 4, I remember going to the hospital because I had bronchitis, and I remember
Right.
bargaining with God as a 4-year-old, going, I don't want
Yeah,
to
I mean,
die,
I
God.
have a similar memory. I remember praying to God to not have nightmares. I used to have repetitive nightmares. And I can distinctly remember, I don't know what age I was, where I would pray to God before sleep not to have nightmares, and it often helped. I wouldn't have the nightmares.
Right. So, but he's different from you in that when he disconnected from his faith, there was something that he actively wanted to get back, that when he
Right.
went back to Christianity. You've never really yearned for,
Right.
correct? I mean, I don't sense it in
Yeah.
you.
I mean, my wanting to believe is only sort of on sort of an intellectual level. I want to believe if it's justified. I want to believe if it's warranted. If I believe it's true. I don't want to believe just to believe. I don't want to believe.
And you
I don't
have
want
enough intellectual integrity, unlike not most, but unlike some atheists, to actually, instead of saying, where's the evidence, you actually start doing some investigation on your own to see, to put yourself in a position where you could actually find out if there is something there, right?
Yeah, I like to, the way I put it, to be open-minded, to be really open-minded, you have to risk your views changing. So you have to. So I mean, you don't have to, but if you really, I think I've always taken the religious position seriously and respectfully, even if I haven't believed. And I want to hear the arguments. I want to hear the reasons why people believe, and so that if I do come across evidence that I think is sufficient and reliable enough, then I'd want to believe. Now, there's a big jump from believing in God and then becoming a Christian. So that would be another. Just believing in God would be one step, and then what kind of God and the characteristics of that God would be a whole other question. But right. That's a separate thing.
Right, but you're willing to. You're not just kind of saying, I don't know, you're doing something completely different than a bunch of people, atheists, will do. But part of what was different about Mike McHargue is that he had a desire to reconnect, to come back to faith. Right. And we'll get into his at least statements. You recognize that they're kind of a little shaky, but the thing that I liked about his at least statements is that I was doing some of those myself prior to me having read his book, and I was using it as a form of apologetic, because there's see what I'm trying to do with you, okay, and I think you actually even agree with this is the right thing to do, is to chisel the spiritual realities down to what you, the atheist, and I, the Christian, can agree are the knowable facts about the situation. So we just get to what we disagree on. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, we can cover the ground that we totally agree on and specify what exactly that is.
Right. To identify where we agree, where we disagree, and then zero in on the parts where we disagree.
Right. But my inkling is different, is that if we just get to the knowable facts and we just start to spell them out, that, that's the whole thing right there. That's
I mean, I guess, like, if I came to agree that God was a knowable fact, then I would, I'll be believing, right?
Right.
So yeah.
Right, but I'm not necessarily, but there's different ways of even framing the ontology of God that you could probably go, okay, I believe that already. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Depending on how you, like, I could come up with a slippery Peterson-esque definition of God, and unlike most atheists go, see, that's a scam, you'd recognize that it was bending the idea a little, but you'd probably go, yeah, I can believe in that ontology already. Do you know what I mean? Or something close to it.
I just like with Peterson, I sort of see Mike's at least definitions of God more consistent with the no God hypothesis than the God hypothesis. His
definitions of at least, I was doing at least, I was talking about the Bible, and I was doing it before I read his book. The Bible is at least a book of spiritual stories that are the spiritual insights of, ancient Hebrews and ancient people. Right. That's at least what the Bible is. And everybody could go, yeah, okay, that's what the Bible is, right?
Yeah, and I'd agree with that too. Yeah.
Okay. See, there's a way to do an at least God type stuff, but his aren't quite there. They're kind of like, he's forcing the issue a little bit. He kind of scammed himself. I don't know if he scammed himself. Well, I know you don't believe
what he did is I think what he did is he sort of, I don't know, embraced the bias. So I think he after spending a lot of time discussing and looking into skepticism, I think his desire to believe sort of was more powerful, And so he sort of then put aside sort of trying to control for his bias, and he sort of said, well, I've come up with something that's plausible, and I'm going to let my bias take me there. I think that's sort of what he did.
Well, like with his hallelujah moment probably weirded you out more than anything else. And he even acknowledges that it's not very plausible. But okay, go.
Yeah.
Tell me what you thought of his hallelujah moment.
You know what the thing is, though? I think it is
convincing
plausible that he had an experience. And I mean, he described himself that day being in an extremely agitated state. He talked about being in existential crisis. It is not at all surprising to me that could produce an altered state of consciousness where he has this, whether it was his own thought that he perceived as audible, or he heard someone say something and he interpreted it as God saying, I was with you when you were 8 and I'm with you now. You know,
right. That could
like
be like
he was
that could be a repressed, that could be a repressed idea of him where he wanted that comforting thing. You know, that could easily be his own mind in the moment, and he's experiencing it as third party. That's a really important thing to talk about, because there are a lot of different things that we can go into where, and this is one of the things I've tried to talk about on my channel, where instincts and intuitions take you over and you experiencing them as third party. Not necessarily God is taking you over, but you experience it as like you're almost on autopilot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, my general approach to stories like that is they're intriguing, they're interesting, but we really have no good way of evaluating them. We have to accept, I think, the way in which the story occurred, that it's at high risk of bias error, that having an experience does not make one. Someone in the chat saying, who's he? We're talking about Mike McCargue. Is that how you pronounce his name? Mike McCargue.
Yeah, I think that's how you pronounce it.
McCargue, the author of Finding God in the Waves.
Story. The specific thing where he comes back to God. Tell him a brief synopsis.
Sure. So he was at this conference. I forget exactly what conference it was, but it was a conference with a lot of religious people, and he had been going for some time, through an existential crisis where he was gradually, where he was losing his faith, but pretending he was an atheist whose family and whose life was all ingrained in the church. And so he was leading this double life. On the internet, he was this atheist skeptic, and in his personal life, he was like was it a pastor or
pastor? Yeah.
Yeah, he was a pastor, and he was invited to these conferences with very religious people. And so he was sort of at this stage where he was like ready to sort of come out as an atheist. And he describes being in an extremely agitated state, that he describes that whole day at this conference just being completely overwhelmed and completely just in a very anxious state. And then he had just to sort of turn away for all, and then he hears this audible voice saying, I was with you when you were 8 and I'm with you today. And that brought it all back. That brought him back to faith, that he interpreted this as right. God.
And it's interesting because it's probably the least plausible part of the testimony in terms of, I don't think anybody outside of him is going to go, yeah, that was God. I doubt you thought it was God. I mean, no, you're being generous. You're being generous because you're in public and you're talking to a Christian. But I'm pretty sure you're like, oh, come on. There's no way that was God. You didn't go. You didn't have like a moment where you're like, wait, was that God? You know what I'm saying? You were totally like, okay, that's not God, dude. Right?
Yeah, my certainly my instinct was that, okay, that's really interesting, and I don't doubt that something like that happened, that he had some experience that affected him in a very deep way, but as far as strong evidence, reliable evidence of God, it's fairly weak. It's just subject to bias and error, and it's not his fault. He didn't do anything wrong. It's done in a way like I take stories like that as hypothesis generators. So you have this experience and you can't explain it. It's amazing. And then you use that as the hypothesis is it was God. Then you look for better evidence that confirms. So sort of how we do science, right? That you have an idea. You don't start off with a great theory or even often a hypothesis. Most hypotheses are wrong. And then you go out and test it. So you take the unusual result as your reason for wanting to do the higher quality, less biased work that will help confirm it. And that may or may not be possible. So sometimes you're in a rock and a hard place, and he acknowledges that. I think he says something to that effect that, when you don't have great evidence, that's all you have. Now, my statement would be, well, that's when if you want to be skeptical, if you want your beliefs to be sufficiently warranted, then that's where you withhold belief, or at least try to withhold belief, because I don't think we can completely control our beliefs, but we can say, I don't have the evidence for this, so I either want to go out and find it, or maybe I have to change my belief or just hold off for now.
Right. And he acknowledges to some degree, which is actually far ahead of a lot of other people, that he is pushing it to some degree. He's faking it till he makes it. He's consciously chosen to it's weird because the thing that he's doing is, I want you to do some of, but not to the extent where you feel like you're deceiving yourself in the opposite direction, because you can deceive yourself on both ends. You can be skeptical up to a point where it's completely warranted and good, and then there's skeptical, which is also like, I roll my eyes because it's like, oh, come on, you know what I'm saying? You know what that was, and both are in error. Like, you can be not necessarily too skeptical, but cynical, I guess is the word I'd be using. I don't
Sure. Like the way I put it, I don't want to bias myself in favor of God or against God. I want to try to control for my biases as well as possible. What I see him doing is deliberately choosing methodologies that are designed to increase one's bias in favor of the hypothesis he wants. And that's if one wants.
That's what he acknowledges that he does that. And
he basically does, which I mean, I guess confused me a bit, because he spends all this time establishing his skeptic cred, but then he kind of throws the primary,
because you don't understand how he was raised. How I perceive that is, he was raised as a Christian. You and I were raised as secular people. There's a really big difference. I had little moments here and there where I was like, maybe there is a God, or I prayed to God here and there, but it wasn't the same. He was raised as it's hard for someone who's raised like that to perceive when it's inauthentic. It's like, fake it till you make it isn't something. There's a way to say fake it till you make it so that it's not actually dishonest. It's that.
Oh no, I don't think he was. I don't think he was dishonest there. I think, like, he was saying, fake it till you make it as a strategy. Like, so he was being very clear that this is a technique, a method for skeptics or doubters to use to help find a connection with God. So he wasn't being dishonest. He put it all on the table. I guess I just don't know. So he spends all this time establishing his skeptic cred, but what does he want the reader to do with that once he starts going into his analysis? His less skeptical analysis. It's almost like he wants the reader to say, well, hey, I understand skepticism, so you should go with me on this, which is not a great.
I'm not sure
if that's what he was trying to do.
If he was trying to evangelize with the book at all. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. I guess he was.
He has. I mean, honestly, he has to. I mean, that can only be his goals to evangelize a bit, right? What is his goal if it wasn't evangelical at all?
I mean, I guess. That's why it was weird here in your book report, because I was like, we read two completely different books. It's like, what book did you?
Now, do you think any of my takes? Did you disagree with any of my takes?
No, actually, I thought your takes were almost 100% on point. But I was I was just responding to different things that he was saying in the exact same story. Like the original reason he deconverted had a lot to do with him. His father, who he had so much faith in, was going to divorce his mom, and
Right.
that and then he started doing that Old Testament scam that a lot of atheists and anti-theists do. Is like, I can no longer read the Old Testament because I'm just drawn towards these challenging parts of the old. He started running that scam on himself. Where he starts, quote unquote, agonizing over these terrible scriptures in the Old Testament. So that those two things were instrumental. And the first one I totally understand. Like, if you, I can't. I mean, I can't think of a thing. The only thing I can think of that could ever take faith out of me to any meaningful degree, and there's just no way this is ever going to happen. But there was, I don't know if you know, do you know the Purpose Driven Life guy? You ever hear his name?
Oh, it's very familiar. Hold on, Purpose.
His son. Okay, he's a world famous pastor. The book was the best selling nonfiction book of all time. Okay, so he's a very successful
Rick Warren.
preacher.
Yeah, Rick Warren. Yeah.
His son committed suicide.
Right.
Now that would shatter me to the point where I could easily walk away. Even if I still honestly believed in God, I would just be too. I don't know for a fact that I could overcome that. I'd be like, I hate you.
and you know what? The odd thing is, as horrible as that event would be, I would say that's not a great reason to stop believing in a God. It may be a reason to stop believing in an all good God, but it's not a reason to. The problem of evil, the problem of suffering, doesn't prove or disprove or to say anything about whether a deity exists. It just says
I'm not being rational. I'm just saying that would shatter me to the point where there's nothing else I could think of, because that would be just too. There would be an unbridgeable chasm between me and God from that day forward. I would just can't see me ever getting over that. However that would manifest itself. I'm not saying
sure.
Do you know what I'm saying? I'm just saying I couldn't recover from that. I don't think. That's the only thing I can think of. That's the only thing.
But here's an interesting thing. That happens every day to people. So it's curious that that does happen. And so, so you're saying it's only if it happened to you that it would affect your.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about for me personally.
Yeah.
Obviously, sometimes there are trials and tribulations in life, and sometimes those they're either faith strengthening. You feel like God really helped you through this difficult circumstance, and now you're closer to God because of it. A lot of people report that. Or the opposite happens. You're like, why would God allow this to happen in my life? Him and I are done. You turn off some mechanism inside of you.
So you're almost talking about not being a Christian, not necessarily not believing in God.
I'm just saying, like, that's what started his crisis of faith.
Right. No, I get it. Yeah.
And that's the only thing I could think of that would produce a legitimate crisis of faith in me. Every other thing that I could think of would be part of an organic life experience, because that's even the problem of evil. Okay. The problem of evil, I don't want to get sidetracked into this because we can have conversations about it, but the problem of evil, even the evil is an organic part of life to a certain degree. Yes, there's a lot of evil, but it's not overwhelming to the point where I've lost faith in life, or I think life is not overwhelmingly good, beneficial, profoundly good gift for most people. It's not even close. So it'd have to be something that would happen to me personally. And that's the only thing I could think of that I could never, ever process and recover from, because that would just be too suicide. If you got hit in a car crash, maybe I could live with that. I could reconcile it. Suicide, I couldn't. I'd just be like too shattered. It's like I said, the problem of evil is kind of a scam too. It's perfectly legitimate to question God's character from behind the walls of a concentration camp, or from a cancer ward, sure. But from like cozy little YouTube videos where you have pretty, I don't know how it's going on your end, but here it's really pretty fun. I'm doing pretty well for myself.
Yeah, I know.
So,
but I think I mean, I don't want to get too much into the problem of evil. I think you can still do an analysis. I mean, I think I brought this up with you. I mean, I think a decision to create carnivores is pretty hard to justify with omnibenevolence. A system that just leads to such a massive amount of suffering. But we don't need to get into that. Like, that's a whole other discussion that we're probably going to be sidetracked if we get into that now.
So okay, so let's go back to your first couple of things. You almost all of your responses at the beginning, I completely understand, and they were pretty thorough in terms of. Do you have your notes again? Where'd we leave off in your notes?
Oh, I'm not sure. I've just been going back and forth through my notes. So I mean, we talked about I think we were talking about when he was losing his faith.
Right. Now, so there's a whole different experience with you because you didn't have any crisis of faith. You didn't have any faith to lose. Has there ever been any type of yearning in you? Like, I wish I could be cool like Craig. That's probably
Well, every day I wish I could be cool like you. But
I know that. Yeah. So you wish you could have it together like me. So like, I want to be a Christian.
That's right.
That's got to have something to do with it.
No, I don't think I've had a yearning for God in that same way. I think I've had sometimes the fear of being wrong. And, if there really is a God who punishes you for eternity for not believing, then, I'm screwed.
Watch out.
So, yeah. So I've had elements of that from time to time, not to a pathological degree. Like they haven't, it's just every once in a while that thought,
now, do you
pops
believe,
into my mind.
Now, do you believe in, like a destiny, like you're doing what you were supposed to do in life? Do you have any sense of like, this is what I'm called to do, this communication thing, these spiritual spirit? Don't you feel some sort of connection? That's
yes and no in that. So I think that people are born with certain propensities or certain potential talents, right? That certain people, are born with whatever biology that they could be a really good athlete or have a certain brain structure. I think there are things that people are good at, and that are naturally good at, where they'll be good at and somebody else won't be. And there's probably, I mean, I haven't looked into this at all, but there's probably an even distribution of these type of people across the world. So I think that when there's a disconnect between how we see what we're good at or what we think our purpose is and what we're achieving, we feel pretty bad. And when we sort of discover, for example, our purpose, something we're really good at, where we can contribute, where we're in a meaningful way, I think we have a lot of us have a natural. I think we feel very good. We feel fulfilled when we contribute to, for example, to society, or that when we contribute to something bigger than ourselves, right? And so it's not destiny in the sense of somebody planned it this way. But I think, for example, I think some people have certain natural talents or certain things they're better at than others. And when they can find a niche that lets them use those talents, that's amazing for them. And that really helps give them a sense of purpose.
You would say that they should use those talents for the betterment of society and themselves and other people, right?
Yeah, I think
put a value statement on it, correct?
Yeah, I put a value statement. I mean, I believe we have sort of a social contract that we live in a society that we cannot accomplish our goals by ourselves. We depend on other people, and so I think we do have sort of a duty to contribute. It's not that our entire lives have to be dedicated to that.
Now, do you consider yourself like a naturally ethical person? Is that seems to be? And would you relate it to humanism or some type of?
I sort of do my own thing. Like, there's probably certain beliefs I have that are compatible with humanism. I don't really call myself a humanist, mainly because I haven't really, I've read the humanist manifestos, but I haven't really spent a long time. I haven't really delved into it to see, do I agree with everything? And I'm not a great fan of those kind of labels. I think overall I'm a good person. I think I do not so great things sometimes. I get angry. I sometimes download,
porn all the
videos.
time.
Well,
Gay porn.
we'll talk about
information,
the porn. No, but sometimes I'll like I pay for Netflix, but if there's something that's not on Netflix, I might download a torrent video of a movie that I want.
I thought you said ethical. I thought you said you were an ethical person.
Yeah, so
I did that and got caught, dude. I did that and got like, I don't know.
You?
It was really, it was really strange because I thought it was I went to a haircutter girl who told me about this website, and I went on there and downloaded like a couple of cool movies. It was what was the Straight Outta Compton, I think it was, and watched it.
Right.
So that was like 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And then I got my wife got like an email like
yeah, they were doing that for a while. I got a couple of those sometimes. Yeah, and now they're not doing those anymore. So I would say overall, I would like to think I think I'm a good person, but I'm far from a perfect person. So I make my mistakes, and but I was listening to a discussion between G-Man and SJ, where G-Man was making the argument that no one is good because to be good means perfectly good. Now, I don't really subscribe to that definition. I think I would say I'm more good than bad, but I definitely have my pros and cons.
So you don't follow the ethical preachings of G-Man. You're not. You
no, not from what I.
You're not a disciple of G-Man's ethical. Now, do you recognize some of the Peterson-esque religious value of religion in a sort of Peterson-esque, like, where are these ethics coming from? Like you're naturally ethics are somewhat important to you, and you recognize that you're kind of a bad person. You steal a lot of Netflix, and you no, but so where are these things coming from? Do you're kind of not an anti-theist in that sense anymore, right? You recognize that religion had something to do with planting those ideas in people, right?
Right, but remember, I think that religion comes from people, right? So because I don't believe in God, like I don't have any problem saying if Christianity has some good principles that we should we should go with them. So when a Christian said, "Oh, you got that from Christianity," I'm like, okay, maybe I did, but why would that be a bad thing? I mean, if Christianity has some good principles, let's go with them. I think the golden rule is a pretty good thing. I'm not going to not follow it or not consider it good just because it came from Christianity. I think that the ethics from our religions, because I don't believe in God, my most likely hypothesis is that the ethics that we've developed over years through religion have come from people figuring out the best ways to live and evolving their beliefs over years and years and years.
But I don't know, you touched on something in your book review that you kind of process this on a deeper level that's almost spiritual. Like you kind of recognize that he was getting some, I forget how you said it in your book review, but he was getting some positive benefits of connecting as a spiritual person.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead. You tell me.
Yeah, like I think that as we've gotten away,
there was some anthropomorphizing that you kind of recognized may actually be a necessary part of it. Think that's
sure.
How you said it, but go.
I gave an example, for example, where I've suffered from anxiety in the past, and even currently, and I used to have this knot, this sort of like a ball in my chest. It felt like, and it's probably muscles, they were just very tight and spasming or whatnot, but it was very uncomfortable. Like even though it didn't hurt, I rated on the pain on a scale of 3 out of 10, probably, if you compared it to say a knife, but it would bowl me over. Like it would make me crunch over. And I had that for years, and was almost ever present or would come and go, but it would stay for a very long time. And what I started doing several months ago, and I was actually inspired by, not from religion, but I was listening to these videos of this girl who has multiple personality disorder or dissociated identity disorder, and where she had trauma when she was young, and her personality, split into different people, right? And I thought, well, if trauma can cause our personalities to split, I still have all that in me. It's just unified. So I said, maybe I can talk to my knot, and I sort of gave it a name and gave it almost a personality. And I would talk to it, say, hey, what, this isn't great for us. I know what you're trying to do. I know you're trying to protect me, like talking to the anxiety. And amazingly, the knot disappeared. And when it started coming back, I talked to it. I give it a name and I talk to it, and it goes away and it responds like in a very real way. I'll feel the knot coming. I'll talk to it in my head, and it's almost like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go now. So I can see like
yeah, but that's
to me,
close to
right.
so close to genuine a practicing Christian experience. They'll even say things like, the tongue holds the power of life and death, and speaking out on things. There's a way of process. I mean, go ahead. I don't mean to cut you off, but that's close to the same thing. That's the point.
That's it. I think phenomenologically, so from an experiential level, I think, again, there's nothing stopping atheists and theists from having very similar experiences, right? And we just interpret it different. I interpret it as just a part of my psyche, right? A theist may interpret it as God intervening.
But what you were doing, but wait, because before you turn it into it's not God, what you did though, you started doing intuitively, and you started doing it intuitively in a way that's making use of a spiritual side of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I had an insight. I had an insight spawned from these videos of this girl with dissociative identity disorder, and so I drew a connection. I thought maybe I don't have that, but maybe there's some of that in all of us, and I could benefit from it. So I tried it. I just said, hey, let me try it. What do I have to lose?
Right, but it worked, and it was like,
yeah, it worked. Yeah.
Right. So you recognize the tool aspects of some of what religious people do. The utility, like I was at one point I was going to do a syllogism on the psychological utility of my spiritual experiences. I wouldn't even have to bother trying to prove it to you because you get it automatically, right?
I think I get it in your case. In other people's cases, I might not. For example, I mean, there are people who are
like Ken Ham. Right. Like, no, I don't see it, Ken. Sorry. Buddy.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain people who I think are harmed. I mean, there are people who are just racked with fear over hell, or there are certain people who want to impose their beliefs on other people. So I, from what I know of you, I don't have those concerns because I know I've gotten to know you, and I don't see that.
But we're talking about me. We're not. I'm the case study of the Christian. I'm not like these other Christians who with them it's like whatever's floating their boat.
You're not like the other girls, eh, Craig?
No, definitely no. John misgendered me in my. Is he there, John? You misgendered me. He said, Craig, she. I don't know. He called me a she in his response to my video. Okay, so wait. No, I totally understand, but the case study. You're the case study for the atheist. And I'm the case study for the Christian. So all of your experiences of Christianity relate to me. If you see me, then it's something that's organic to Christianity. If you see another person, that person could be troubled, and it has nothing to do necessarily with what they say they are. Does that make sense? No.
Sure. And like for example, when you talk about going into your prayer closet, in my mind, I convert it to he's meditating.
Right.
And everything you say about your experience, I believe. I think you are having those benefits, and I think you're probably doing pretty deep meditation. You say you go in for what, half an hour at a time. That's
hour and a half.
Yeah,
or so.
That's intense meditation. Like you're basically a practicing meditator. That's a lot more like these days I'm working on 15 minutes right now.
Ultimately that's where we're headed with our project. Is I'm gonna try to have a series of things for you to do that should be pretty easy, and see what you get out of them, and see you're probably gonna like them, and then see where that takes you and what you experience. So
Oh, John Lloyd is asking, were you talking about him, or were you talking about? I think you were talking about writer John Buck, or were you talking
no,
about?
writer John Buck. He misgendered
Yeah.
me. Now, okay, I think we're 6:15. Should we wrap it up for today? And
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a part 2 to the book review, because there was a lot of stuff that you were thorough about, and I want to cover it
Sure.
in depth. But I only listened to it once so far. So
Sure.
what,
I mean,
go,
yeah. I just wanted to ask. I mean, I think we have a few people watching. Does anyone have any questions about what we're doing?
right.
That they want to.
We'll go for like 10 more minutes, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure. Yeah. So
10,
post
15.
your questions if you're there in the chat. And
what are you guys talking about?
What are you doing? Yeah.
So
yeah.
No, the spiritual technique that you intuitively adopted is actually, it's kind of exactly what John Vervaeke would call a psychotechnology.
Yes.
But some of them are powerfully effective. So you can see how they might be effective in the lives of Christians they might be misappropriating some, but they might be doing some that are actually really beneficial. So, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, for sure. And like that's, again, one reason why I'm not an anti-theist is that I think that for example, one thing churches really have done a very good job is fostering community and cultivating community, and that, and giving people a place. I think maybe this is what you're talking about: giving people a place, helping people find their place in the world. John Vervaeke would call it their agent arena relationship. Finding a place where they belong, a home. So the churches and other religions have done a very good job, I think, of that. And as we've gotten away from the more secular society, I think one thing we've done a very poor job of doing is cultivating community and cultivating that sense of belonging and
meaning. I mean, that's his whole
meaning.
thing.
Yes,
the meaning crisis. That's what it's all about. And prior to Christianity, whether you think that God had anything to do with it, you recognize that, I was self-medicating with drugs and alcohol a lot, and I don't do that at all anymore. So some of what I've got out of the practices have been powerfully restorative and powerfully,
for sure. And I don't doubt that for a second. Yeah, I mean,
right. So I
this.
mean, you totally get a lot of it easily. So that part's the other thing I was going to tell you. Okay. So for someone like David Wood, who says he used to be a psychopath or a sociopath, and then
that he still is. That he still is a psychopath. But his Christianity has helped him not act on it. I think.
Maybe he's a bad example, but you do recognize that.
Well, no, he's a good example. I would say, if I was offered to debate David Wood, I would refuse. David Wood is not somebody I would want to try to convince not to be a Christian. He's somebody who, if he loses his belief, I think he would be mistaken, but it doesn't matter if he's mistaken and concludes that it's okay for him to go bash people's heads in with hammers. That's a bad thing. So I'm just like, if somebody, like you said, if you came to me while you were in AA and that you said, God is right now is stopping me from doing all of this, from being an alcoholic, and I've turned to God and it's working for me, I wouldn't want to try to convince you out of that. I'm not looking I'm not an evangelical atheist in the sense of,
right. No,
I'm not looking to convince. I want to have these discussions with people who want to have these discussions. I'm not looking just to impose lack of belief on people. Now, there's a question in the chat: how is God false? I don't take the position God is false. I take the position that there's insufficient reliable evidence to warrant belief that God exists, and there's also insufficient reliable evidence to warrant belief that God does not exist. That being said, my bias is certainly towards the God does not exist. So I think that's more likely than the other hypothesis, but I'm not 100% on it, and I would want to I think it's irrational to state there's sufficient reliable evidence that no gods exist. I don't think you can do that. That you can maybe find contradictions with certain depictions of God, but I don't think there's an argument, at least not that I've heard, that we could say we've demonstrated that no gods exist.
Right.
Yeah.
Now let's go out on a speculative limb. So you recognize that at one point in my life that my spiritual practices were powerfully transformative and restorative to a certain degree, and useful. You think how would you define it in secular terms? Obviously, you don't think God stepped in and took Craig Reed from like dysfunctional alcoholic, smoked 2 packs and 3 packs of cigarettes a day. Fun.
Well, I mean, I'd have to probably. I'd have to talk with you about what thoughts were going through your head and what conversations you were having with God. I suspect my guess would be that you were promoting in your head some very good principles, that God would not want me to do this, that God is there, God will help me not do this, and that gave you the motivation and the ability to.
But like the peace of mind aspect of like prayer is a powerful tool in and of itself, because part of what you do, or at least part with me, was like, you're trying to self-medicate with drugs and alcohol when you're using them to a certain degree.
Sure.
You're trying to quell something inside of you. You know what I mean? You're trying to solve, you're trying to soothe, and if you can find other tools of bringing that type of reliable stability and sanity and peace of mind is the only other way I can think of it, really, then you're good to go, right? So that's
I think that your belief and what you told yourself and the narratives you were following gave you a sense of home. It gave you a place where you belonged, and that you felt that you were being looked after, and that you had a relationship, and that helped you to stop doing what you were doing. And then probably my guess is as you stopped, you started probably finding benefits. Purpose, right. But also your life probably, I suspect, as you stopped drinking and smoking and all that, your life improved for the better, and that probably also helped serve motivation to keep you going. That hey, this is good. There are good results happening from this, and you recognize that there were bad results happening. Like you don't need God to tell you that being addicted to drugs and alcohol is not a great thing, right? You probably had very apparent lessons every single day. My guess is.
Of course.
Right.
Of course.
So I think these narratives for that religions provide, I think, can be very inspiring. Now, I know also, from what I understand, at least, for example, it doesn't work for a lot of people. So it worked for you, and that's amazing. But for a lot of people, it doesn't.
Well, there's a lot of problems that a lot of what the anti-theists recognize, and it's partially how they were raised, so they recognize it easily, is that there's real problems with church culture in the United States of America. Because part of the reason it worked for me is that I happened to find a church that was, people were actually really good, and they reached out to you, and they were welcoming, and that was a big part of being able to easily connect. That's not true everywhere across the country. A lot of times you'll find the opposite. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Sorry, just looking in the chat. Duncan Atheism was saying there's no neutrality towards God. My position isn't neutrality. I don't think.
Is that Darth? Darth is here?
Cool. I'm not sure. Is it? I don't know. Hi, Darth. I don't think we've ever talked before. Or I'm not sure if we have.
He's a priest. So if it's Darth Dawkins, he's a priest. He's gonna beat you. Don't debate him.
I mean, my position isn't one of neutrality. It is of withholding belief based on my assessment. In that, if I want and again, I admit my bias is towards the not believing in a God. Now, what I would, I guess, say is, if I have that belief, I mean, it's really hard to just identify whether you believe something or you're withholding belief. But if I have that belief, I would say it's not entirely warranted. That I believe there isn't sufficient reliable evidence that there's no gods. Now, I'm very skeptical, for example, of an omnibenevolent God or an omnipotent God or I would be much more not believing in a Omni 3 type God, for example. But so my position isn't neutral in that I've heard arguments, I've exposed myself to arguments, I'm doing that right now, and my position goes back, we'll go back and forth in different directions. But my conclusion is, at least at this time, that there is insufficient evidence to warrant. So there is insufficient reliable evidence to justify belief in God, because I want my beliefs to be justified. So again, I wouldn't call it neutrality in that I'm not indifferent to it. I'm not just 50-50, right? It's it's an ongoing process of investigation and arguments and beliefs going back and forth.
He's still an atheist, but the project has just begun, and he has promised me the tithes at the end of the project. So,
well, yeah, I don't know if I've promised the tithes.
He's promised the tithes. He promised 10% of your income once I
virtual tithes. Yeah.
Why? Oh, you have no income? Is that the deal? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
Or how about we'll exchange tithes? And yeah.
Or John, we'll take John's tithes. How about that?
And I think so. John Lloyd asked, "Will this be continued?" Was for you, POD. I think he's asking, are we going to be continuing this project? And if that's what he's asking, then yes, definitely.
Yes, ongoing project. We're going to do a part 2 of the book review in like either 3 or 4 weeks, depending on what Brett does. And should I tell you the other assignments on there, or should we talk about those off air?
Sure. I mean, you can give a preview now, and then we can talk about it. Why don't you give a brief preview now, and then we can talk about it more.
Well, you're good at book reviews, so I was going to give you 2 more books to review. For different reasons, and then we're going to do a part 2 of the I'm going to re-listen to your book review of Finding the Waves, and then I was going to give you 2 more books to review, but that's over a 2-month period. That's not too much, right?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's fine. And we still want to do I still want to get my 50 quotes
your 50 quotes and then I was going to have you make some at least statements that try to make sense. Try to make some at least statements. Like you have my Bible one, and then maybe one about religion, whichever you feel led. However you feel led by the Lord.
Yeah, I mean, we can try. I'm not sure. Like my idea of the definition of God, like the simplest definition of God that I know, that I sort of come up with for how I understand God to be thought of, is a being, so an entity with a will and an intention, with the ability to create a universe. So that's I think the simplest. Not that I believe that exists, but that to me is, when I think of what is a God, what is a deity, or a supreme deity, at least, you could have polytheism, but that's how I think of. When I think of God, that's what comes to mind. Like, forget about Christianity or Judaism or Islam, but God is an entity, a conscious being, a mind with the ability to create a universe.
Right. Also, one last thing before we sign off. Your miracle of the Mass. What was the miracle of the? What was the miracle at the end of your book report?
Oh, well, you're framing it as a miracle. Yeah. So you and other
because we'll go over this on the next stream.
Sure.
We'll go over this in depth, and then we'll start looking. We'll start seeing if we find miracles in your life and the evidence
Sure.
that God has blessed this endeavor and is actually shining.
Maybe we can leave this as a teaser.
It's up to you. If you want to,
yeah.
We can talk about it off air. And just there's going to be a miracle on the next stream.
I mean, I could tell. I mean, briefly, a lot of theists over the years, various Christians over the years, have advised me to reach out to God. So periodically, usually before I go to sleep, what I'll sometimes do is say something in my head along the lines of, God, if you exist, please reveal yourself to me, or make yourself apparent to me. I can't promise how I'll react, but I'll promise I'll take it seriously and go from there. So words and sentiments to that effect. And while I was in the process of reading this book, one of the nights I did this, And so I also have I have sleep apnea, which I'm sure no one is surprised given my weight. So I have this mask, and I've got a really old mask and tube that sort of started weakening. And so what will often happen is that the tube will, if I turn the wrong way, put any kind of pressure on it, the tube will just pop out, from, sort of a connected tube. And what but it'll usually pop out from a movement. So, I've tugged on it, so it's pulled out of its socket, right? Now, what happened this night, and this has never happened before, is that within a minute of my making that prayer, for want of a better word, an appeal to God, if God exists, the mask literally popped out of the tube. So again, normally what happens is I'll turn and it will, it'll just be yanked out. But I was just lying on my back, just sleeping, just lying normally. I didn't move at all. And it literally just went flying. I put it back on, and it happened again and it happened again. I was like, wow, that's something, the little weirdness of it happened right after.
Got on your knees right down in there and repented.
Now, what did occur to me not too long after the weirdness is that I had done, or do you want to leave that as a teaser? And
yeah, we can leave it as a teaser. This
do the analysis
to be revealed. Then the blinding white light entered the room, and he said, "Craig Reed, I must follow Craig Reed."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It wasn't quite that dramatic, but again, it was like again, I like I said in my video, I want to be intellectually honest. So I didn't want to ignore it. I wanted to account for it and report it, that this did happen, and it did happen very shortly after the appeal. Now, and nothing else sort of odd that I can identify has ever happened in any other times that I've asked. So this was something new.
Yeah, totally. All right. So we'll be looking for signs and pseudosigns and things like that. And so I guess we'll sign off and we'll discuss a little bit how we're going to proceed after we're off air.
Sure. Well, and also maybe after you can put links to my videos, to my book review, in your show notes. So if people want to go and hear my we've gone over parts of it. It's long. I'm sorry, guys. It's like 50 minutes. I just kept on going.
It's good.
But if people want to listen to over on my channel, to my analysis, and I have quotes and I put them up on the screen. So you can definitely, Craig, you can. You know how to put. You know how to add to the show notes, right? Yeah. You're a boomer, but you're okay with that. Yeah. Okay, boomer. You can't resist the okay boomer. I'm Generation X, and I think you're technically Generation X too. But
I'm Generation X, actually.
Yeah. So feel free to check out my actual book review that I did for the book we've been talking about is Mike McCargue's Finding God in the Waves. He's this Christian Christian pastor, describes his journey from faith to atheism, skepticism, back to faith, and he has a definite interest in science and certainly understands science and the atheistic, skeptical points of view. So that's the book we've been talking about.
Okay, so with that, we will sign off and keep checking back for this stream. We are turning Brett from atheist into Christian, into fully realized Ken Ham. If you see a young Earth creationist a year from now, don't come crying to me, because
that's right.
You created a monster. Good.
You've heard it here first, and of course when you see Craig as loses his belief because he just was devastated that he wasn't
too skeptic to you, out-skeptic me.
That's right.
Did you consider that?
That's right. Have you thought about Richard Dawkins? No. Yeah, but
yes.
All right, so I'm going to end the stream. Thank you everyone for watching, and really appreciate your questions. And feel free to reach out, and can find me on Twitter too at Pleasure of Doubt. if you want to chat about this or in the comments and so on. And I'll be downloading this and putting a copy on my channel as well. All right, that's it. Thanks a lot.
That is all she wrote.
Thanks, everyone.